Well, the next argument that Descartes offers to demonstrate that the mind and body are in fact two separate things is called the divisibility argument. The divisibility argument is one that utilizes this idea that two things that are identical must have all the same properties. This is going to be the crux of the argument for Descartes. Two things that are identical must have all the same properties. This means that anything that has separate, different properties cannot be identical. Now, just so that we can, be clear, we use the word identical in a loose sort of way in everyday language. Identical here, when we say something like A is identical to B, what we mean is there is only one thing. We can call it A or we can call it B, but when I go to count how many things there are, there's only one. When we have two things that look just alike, but there are in fact two things, loosely speaking, we might call them identical. Identical twins, identical textbooks, identical cars. We'll, loosely speaking, call them identical. But in the strict sense of the word, they are not. They are what we call exactly similar. When two things have all the same properties and they are identical, that means there is only one thing. Okay? So two things that are identical must have all the same properties. What we're really going to find out is that while we talk about two things, we're really not. It's really just one thing. It's one thing with two different names. Okay? So in order for two things to be the same, they have to have all the same properties. Well, the body is divisible and the mind is indivisible. Okay, the body is divisible and the mind is indivisible. The body can be broken up. Okay? Consider, our person here. All right, well, we can, lop off an arm, or we could lop off a leg, right? We can take out the appendix. We can do heart transplants. We can take out the gallbladder, right? The point is that the body can be broken up. Descartes' claim is that the mind cannot be. The mind is indivisible. The mind cannot be broken into pieces. Remember, the mind is this non-physical thing that doesn't have location in space. It doesn't, take up space. So there's no way to divide it. There are no lines to be drawn. There's no way to cut it up. As a result, he says, that means that they cannot be the same thing. Does that make sense? So that's the divisibility argument, the argument that the mind and body are separate things. Well, there are some problems with this. Now, there is an extremely extensive field or subfield in philosophy where we discuss the merit of this first claim here, that two things have, in order to be identical, must have all the same properties. We're not going to get into that discussion. For the sake of this class, we're going to take it for granted. But if you take a more advanced metaphysics class, you'll probably talk about it a little bit more. And it's a lot of fun. But in the meantime, we're actually going to focus on this one. So objections to the divisibility argument, the divisibility argument. We obviously can't claim that the body is not divisible, right? The body is divisible. There's no way to get around that. So the question becomes whether the mind is in fact divisible. And one claim that maybe the mind is in fact divisible is the notion of multiple personality disorder. So the thought is that in multiple personality disorder, in one mind, there exists many different things. So in one mind, there exists, the abrasive protector John personality and the meek and timid Margaret personality and the outgoing, albeit maybe slutty, personality of Veronica. And then we have the very responsible, business-like personality of Jane. I'm not going to remember those names in a moment. The point is that we are seeing what seem to be distinct individuals within one mind. So multiple personality disorder is this notion that the mind can be separated into parts. And in this case, specifically, these different personalities are the parts. Whether that's a good objection, is questionable. On the one hand, if there are in fact different personalities, then that can be separated from each other. It seems like perhaps the mind is divisible. But on the other hand, is it the case that they are really completely and utterly distinct, or is there a unifying personality within them? Is it the case that there's one personality that knows what everybody's doing? And thus maybe that's, the real mind, and the other parts, they're not even parts. They're just other ways the mind instantiates itself. I'm not thrilled with that word choice. But the point is that if in fact these personalities are unified in a way and they're not actually as distinct as we might think, then the multiple personality disorder may not be evidence that the mind is divisible. Of course, there's the other thing that there's some, and I'm not a psychologist, but as I understand it, there is some controversy within the field of psychology that this dissociative personality disorder, this multiple personality disorder, actually exists. I don't know. The next objection is what we call split brain procedures. One rather drastic and not super common treatment for epileptic disorders is to sever the corpus callosum in the brain. And doing that will result in the two hemispheres of the brain not communicating. Okay, those of y'all who don't remember your biology class, there's a bundle of nerves that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain called the corpus callosum. And so the left brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Well, when that corpus callosum is severed, it is been proven. We have video, we have multiple studies on this. It happens that what one side of the brain experiences does not get communicated to the other side. Obviously, we split the communication. So, for example, if you show something to the left eye, the right hand, I'm trying to get this, the right hand can pick out the object from a group. the individual can name the object. So, you show something to the left eye and you say, okay, now pick that out of the box. You show a hammer and the right hand can reach into the box and pull out the hammer. And you can say, well, what is that? And the person can say it's a hammer. Well, if you show something to the right eye, the left hand can't pick it out. They have no idea. And if you ask the person what it is, they can't name it. But if you give the left hand a pencil and paper, they can draw a picture of it. But the person doesn't seem at all aware of why they're drawing the picture of the hammer. The thought is that in discovering these two distinct almost, we might say, individuals. Like, the thought is that, like, the right brain is this whole other individual from the left brain. The left brain can, pick stuff out of boxes and can say stuff, but the right brain is constrained to simply drawing stuff. It seems like maybe there's this other person, this submissive individual that is inhabited in the right brain. And when we have a functioning corpus callosum, it still gets to, like, participate. But when we sever that corpus callosum, it's, like, left out there all by its own. Well, if that's the case, even with those of us who have functioning corpus callosums, functioning bundle of nerves that make the communication okay, could we still have the two things? And does that show that there are two disparate individuals in one mind, and thus the mind is divisible? Does that make sense?